Hi and welcome to this almost everything you need to know about structuring screenplays tutorial. In this video we're going to explore structure in depth and how it applies to screenplays. It also has to be said that structure applies equally to novels and short stories. To begin, we're going to cover the basics of act structure. We'll then move up to key beats, sequences, themes, and then finish with some general tips. If you want any of the free worksheets that accompany this video, visit www.clickimagination.com/support or follow the link below. Before we get into detail, I think it's also worth us doing some myth busting. Firstly, structure isn't plotting. It's not about the detail of your story, it's the broad brushstrokes. Secondly, it's not a formula. Formula would suggest an outcome based on a few set variables, and structure has more freedom than that. Thirdly, it's not about rules. Rules would suggest a harsh consequence if you don't follow them. In reality, the rules, if you call them that, are broken all the time. But in order to break them without detriment to your story, you need to understand the part they play. Finally, keep an open mind. It takes practice to understand structure, but it's worth the effort. Like those magic eye pictures of the 1980s, which if you don't remember were incoherent pictures that didn't make any sense until you pulled your eyes out of focus, very painfully as I remember. With a little practice, you'll soon see through the polished veneer of Hollywood gloss, hopefully without the pain. Understanding the basics of structure, you can then apply it to your own projects. Structure is in everything we do. It's in the way we tell jokes, arrange sentences, or plan journeys. It's intuitive. This is structure in its simplest form and dates back to Aristotle's Poetics way back in 384 BC. Having a structure in stories allows the reader or viewer to be taken on a journey. If you imagine Lord of the Rings starting with Frodo walking out of the Shire with Samwise and no explanation of the ring or the mission, it would seem confusing. In story terms, this beginning, middle and end translate into acts, and today it's the basis of a 3-act structure. Although there are single and 5-act structures still used for short films or TV, don't get hung up on numbers. The basic mechanism of storytelling are the same in every one. So let's look at 3 acts. In the first act, we establish the hero or protagonist in their normal life. The antagonist has a plan and the hero, although he doesn't know it yet, is going to have to stop them. This is the act in which the antagonist raises a question that the protagonist has to answer. It's often referred to as the main tension and, in structural terms, carries the whole film. The second act is often called the actual story or the main canvas. This is where the protagonist and the antagonist play cat and mouse, and the antagonist attempts to carry out their dastardly plan and the protagonist tries to stop them. The third act is referred to as the battle or the resolution. It's really the climax of the film. The protagonist and the antagonist have their showdown and hopefully the hero prevails. At the top of the page you'll see a timeline. Now I'll cover more about this in a video on formatting, but screenplays are generally 90 to 120 minutes long, so if you break the acts down, in simple terms you have 30 minutes for Act 1, 60 minutes for Act 2 and 30 minutes for Act 3. Don't worry too much about the exact timings at this stage, it's more of a proportional guide so you can see whether you have too much setup and the story feels to drag, or too little time is spent on the resolution and the end feels like it's rushed. Okay, so we now have a basic 3-act structure to our story. We can explore the protagonist's journey in more detail. In order to do this, we need to understand the story's key beats, which is to say the major turning points the story will take. Again, this isn't about plotting the story, it's about understanding the extremes. The first beat is the inciting incident. The antagonist's plan has impacted on the hero's real world. The pair are now connected. The hero may or may not directly see exactly how they are involved, but the audience knows it. Importantly, the hero refuses. They do this because of a weakness or flaw. The second act threshold is the point where we enter Act 2. It's the start of the adventure and often symbolised by a journey. By this point, the antagonist's plan is clearly established and so too the hero's objective, the main tension. The main tension is the objective that will carry the whole story. Beat 3, the hero is closest to their objective and has succeeded despite their weakness or fault. It's worth noting at this point that the first half of Act 2, the audience has hope the hero will succeed. In the second half of Act 2, the audience fear he or she won't. By beat 4, the hero has failed in their objective. He or she was not ready for the adventure, and the reason they refused way back in Act 1, that weakness, has meant the antagonist has been able to succeed. Beat 5 is the false resolution or twist. The hero has realised they need to fix themselves, and by doing so are ready to take on the antagonist. At beat 6, the climax, the hero prevails. Balance is restored and the hero is better for their adventure. If you were able to transport them back to Act 1, they would now look out of place. They have grown because of their adventure. So now let's look in more detail about the turning points. Firstly, the start of Act 2. It's important that the hero can't turn back. They are moving forwards all the time. This is Neo being withdrawn from the Matrix, or Sandra Bullock's character drifting free in space in the film Gravity. Although the arrows are shown at the end of these acts, they should also be everywhere else. Beats 3 and 4 are crucial to Act 2. They represent the highs and lows and create the roller coaster ride for the audience. The audience really needs to emotionally feel these beats. Think of Act 2 as a pendulum that's constantly swinging the audience between hope and fear. It's not just in the key beats, but in the plot that sits between them. This shouldn't be generated artificially by plot devices, but rather the driving force of the antagonist and the protagonist themselves. Okay, so let's recap. We now know that structure determines the beginning, middle and end of a story, and we also know that the 6 key story beats determine the emotional roller coaster ride for the hero and the audience. Let's now go back and fill in the spaces between those beats with themed sequences. Themes are really important because they focus and constrain similar events together. Like with montages, themes can convey a linked message that's more powerful than if those events or scenes were dispersed throughout the film. It also helps reduce duplication. Sequences vary in length depending on the screenplay. Their origins lay in the golden age of cinema, when theatres had to change film cans every 12 minutes. Having a complete story in one can, with a hook that kept the audience in their seats, meant that viewers would wait for the next can to be loaded. In this graph, we now see the hero's journey plotted against that of the villain's. This is a really important exercise to do, as it demonstrates the hero and villain are opposites in the story. With the 2 lines plotted together, you really get a sense that something the hero does affects the villain and vice versa. You can download this full worksheet at clickimagination.com/support. So let's look in more depth at the purpose of each of these sequences and get an understanding of how they are used to fill in the space between each of the key story beats. Sequence 1 is the status quo. This is where we see the hero in their everyday life and establish their weakness or flaw. We also see the antagonist developing their plan. The inciting incident is the moment that this plan, or threat of it, is revealed to the hero. It's often accompanied by a direct question. Will you save the world, etc. Sequence 2 is the implication to that question. This is where the hero refuses the question based on their flaw. Refusal is hugely important because it plants a seed in a viewer's mind that the hero could actually fail. It also highlights that the hero alone can stop the antagonist, thus binding them to the story. Sequence 3 is all about assembling a team, talking through the plan and making preparations. The hero is preparing for the mission. Again, the audience is filled with hope. In Lord of the Rings, this is Frodo meeting his companions at Rivendell, agreeing a plan and getting his sword. Sequence 4 is the first triumph. This is the first time the hero is really tested against the antagonist's army. Because the hero is shielded by the team, however, his flaw is not an issue. Looking at the protagonist's line again, we can see that all this rising action from the hero has meant that the antagonist's action line is falling as a result. This next turning point, story beat 3, is where the antagonist turns the tables and comes back with a vengeance. In the case of the Matrix, this is where the agent convinces Regan to sell out his shipmates, and the preceding sequence is about how they are all killed. Sequence 5 is about the hero's plan unravelling. The audience fears for his mission. Everything that was built to support the hero in sequence 3 is being torn away. The hero's flaw or weakness is now apparent and obvious. Sequence 6 is all about failure. The hero's plan is in tatters. The villain is closer than ever to achieving their objective. In Gladiator, this is where Maximus is betrayed, and Cicero and Proximo are killed. All subplots spiral to their lowest point in this sequence. Sequence 7 is about resurrection. The hero finds the strength to fight back, and there is a showdown with the antagonist. We think the story ends there. In horror, this is often the point where we believe the antagonist is dead, but then miraculously they come back to life. Finally, sequence 8 is about salvation. The hero realises their flaw and becomes a changed person. They are able to use this strength to finally defeat the antagonist or save themselves. This resolution is about the hero overcoming their own personal demons. It's what creates a happy ending. So we know all about act structure, key story beats, sequences and themes. With practice, you'll learn to recognise them in the films you watch and also the ones you write. Understanding structure doesn't make a good writer bad, but it can give a writer a framework upon which to build or review their story. Understanding structure provides a framework for discussion to allow writers, editors and producers to talk with confidence about a story and make improvements. A writer who understands structure can give producers, directors and agents the confidence that they're not just flying on luck. As mentioned earlier, once you've learnt the basics, you can forget the exact timing. Once you know there needs to be an inciting incident, you don't have to have it happen exactly 12 minutes in, and you don't need to name your sequences as indicated here. Once you know the basics, you can adapt them for your own story. If you want the structure charts used in this video and loads of other free tips for writers, visit clickimagination.com. The link is in the comments below. Please click the like button and subscribe for future videos.